Thank you for watching my presentation today. My presentation is titled Political Will and Political Work. My name is John Montgomery. I'm based at the University of Kent and my supervisor is Dr. Madeline White. So I'd like to talk about the foundation of my research, which stems from Mintzberg, where he discussed that the organisation was a political arena in 1985. So here he talks about the normal, kind of explicit, formal authority, which is sanctioned through formal, rule-based authority structures, a kind of bureaucratic element. But there's also an illegitimate system of power, technically illegitimate, in that it's not authorised, accepted or certified. This is where politics lies. So to be politically effective, one needs to be both politically skilled and politically willed. So rather than just one or the other, they have to work together. So the organisations that my study consists of is local councils. These are a part of the political workspace. So as Sylvester 2020 outlined, here is work undertaken by elected or appointed individuals whose roles exist to deliver, support or influence democratic government. Now, there are two sets of individuals here. There are your elected individuals whose their job is to do politics. These political behaviours are considered to be legitimate, important aspects of the role. We have another aspect, a business-like dwelling, where officers' behaviours, their political behaviours, are seen very differently. They're seen as self-serving, undesirable, perhaps Machiavelli. However, these motivations have rarely been considered. What are these motivations? Well, political will is often treated differently. So in society here, it's a lack of will to solve crises, starvation, disease, hunger and war is treated more in its absence. In political science, however, we talk about political will as the extent of committed support among key decision makers for a particular policy solution to a particular problem. The key element here is key decision makers. So we bound together a group of individuals to discuss their political will. I look at management in this sense, the motivation to engage in strategic, goal-directed behaviour that advances the personal agenda and the objectives of the actor. Here we can quite clearly see that it's more individualised, it's more individualistic. We are looking at the motivation of people rather than a group of people. Research into political will and political skill has relied massively on the research in political skill. Since Mintzberg discussed both concepts, there has been over 2,000 articles on political skill. The same certainly cannot be said for political will. However, there is some research. So Treadway, for example, talks about 5 dimensions: an instrumental, i.e. self-interest; concern for self, which is more about how one defines themselves; relational, the relationships can be a motivator, for example with co-workers, companies, networks, and interestingly concern for others. So instead of being political for oneself, maybe we're political for others. And this is all regulated by the buffer of risk. So we look at our environment and if we think that the risk is too heavy, we wouldn't do it. Now this was tried to be empirically validated by Kapusis, who tried to come up with a political will scale akin to the political skill scale. Now here he came up with 2 dimensions. He said that actually it was rather we acted in a self-serving manner or we acted in a benevolent political manner. However, there has been some criticism of the benevolent political will dimension through Blickel, who said that it's unclear what benevolence is. There's reference in Kapusis' article to an altruistic motivation, but this wasn't tested. There was also reference to more communally based benevolence. In essence, we're simply not sure, and there has been no real research looking into why people would be benevolent. So whereas the previous dimensions I just introduced are very much quantitative, which follows the pattern of the management literature, Dolder created a qualitative investigation into the political will concept and came up with 3 dimensions: functional, so the beliefs about the outcomes of political engagement; ethical, the moral implications; and emotional, the affective experience. Interestingly, it was seen that these adapt over time. So whereas at the start of one's career, at junior level, we often see politics as dysfunctional, as unethical, towards the end of one's career, this was seen as more functional. It could be leveraged, and politics was not seen as unethical, but more endemic. So in summary, political skill has received a lot of the scholarly attention. When there has been attention on political will, it's often been via political science at the collective level. Within the management literature, there has been numerous frameworks of what political will is, and these are somewhat contested. And importantly, the benevolent dimension within the quantitative work has received significant criticism, and we're not entirely sure what it truly is. There has been no real research that has examined why employees might engage in benevolent political acts. So these are limitations that I'm keen to address. So I'm looking to further understand the political will across the actors. So I think that the traditional elected political actors, whose job it is to be political, can give us great insights to the management literature. Or alternatively, the management literature, looking at the individualized aspects of political will, can have really good can progress really good understanding for political science and political psychology. So to do this, I take a qualitative, in-depth approach to examine the validity of the benevolent dimension of political will, asking the research question, what dimensions of political will are required in political work, looking at both officers and local councillors independently. So this is achieved qualitatively. So I have 60 participants broken into the sample, as you can see. The junior officers are lower level managers, all the way up to the chief executives of councils that I've interviewed. And on the councillors, we have our first term councillors, all the way up to leaders of the council and members of the cabinet. I've then taken a template analysis based on the causal explanations for political behaviour that my participants have given me, and this is based on attributional theory. So these are some of my initial findings, and I will say these are initial findings, obviously, not quite there just yet with my PhD. So these are the senior councillors. So we had our public service ethic, which I think was somewhat expected. This stemmed from often they were following on from their previous occupations, such as teachers, head teachers, etc. Extension of family ethos, quite often mothers or fathers of these individuals were local councillors or heavily involved in the community. Help the less fortunate and improve their community. Perhaps these are perhaps a little bit more benevolent, something to be reflexive about. Compliance of a cabinet position, we can see that at national level as well. Interesting, I think, is the policy area. So in their portfolios, they had this knowledge certainty where they were motivated by a real belief that they knew the best course of action and they were going to be as political as they needed to be to get that done. It was a real certainty of knowledge. But we also interestingly had traditional workplace behaviours. So they wanted to build their reputation, they wanted to network. So reputational development was often about building a collegiate image, but a collegiate image with the understanding that they are the decision makers. And then networking with senior officers, so they wanted to gain information from these. So that's more traditional workplace behaviours, which was interesting to see. Now this was a bit more of a surprise when looking at the senior officers, because we also have our breakdown of workplace and governmental behaviours. So to look through it, often politics was seen at this senior level as a key aspect of their role, as a function of it. For example, as a team leader, they had to fight for their team's resources and support their team well-being. So perhaps this is where we're seeing our benevolent motivation, but it isn't altruistic. Then we have our personal influence, which we'd expect. I want to do well, I want a career, money, promotion, power. But also, they had to be seen as not political to maintain the relationships with influential individuals. They didn't want to rock the boat. There was also this empowerment, mentoring elements. But most interestingly, there was governmental political behaviours. So often they'd look at the external climate, the national climate, and say, well, we need to change things. We need to, because of national political direction, we need to change it. And at the local level, local government model needs changing. They often looked at the local government landscape and thought it needed changing. And again, at this senior level, which is very interesting, was the knowledge certainty. And it probably stems from a different base as the councillors, but they were certain that they were taking the council down the right route, so they were going to be political to get that route achieved, which is very interesting. And then obviously we still had our motivator to not be perceived as party political. These are different office political endeavours. But nonetheless, they did achieve a governmental outcome at times. So after taking a qualitative investigation into political will, we can see elements of self-serving notions and we can see elements of benevolent notions. Hopefully, what will become clearer throughout my PhD is the real motivator behind benevolence. Is it an altruistic motivation? And I must say, I haven't seen any altruistic motivations yet. Or is it a more communal? Is there a middle ground? Are we ever truly benevolent? Are we simply helping other people, but that also helps ourselves? This is something that I'm being very reflexive of and hope to come to somewhat of a conclusion within my PhD. Hopefully you found this presentation somewhat interesting. So please, if you do have any thoughts or feelings around my study, even if you want to just email me to shout at me, please email me. I'm on Twitter. I'm sure I'm on LinkedIn as well somewhere. Thank you so much.